I feel like in terms of the most iconic Apple devices, iPads are definitely up there, but I also feel like, especially lately with releases like the MacBook Neo at its price point, it puts some of the iPads in kind of an interesting spot. So I just wanted to talk about what iPad I have, who I think each of the iPads are for, what are some of the alternatives of each, and also I just kind of don't see a reason to upgrade. So I'm personally still rocking the 7th generation iPad from 2019. I bought it about a year and a half ago, refurbished for $125. I originally got it for a handful of reasons, but recently I've really only been using it 3 ways. One way, and actually maybe my favorite way, is using it with Apple Sidecar, which just turns it into a second or sometimes even third display. I should also note that with Sidecar, it actually gives you the touch functionality in macOS that works with Photoshop style apps. It's actually part of a bigger point I want to make later, but that kind of goes into my second reason I use it, and that's the obvious, to have a larger touchscreen display that I can write and draw and sketch on. If I have an idea in my head for a YouTube thumbnail, a lot of times it's a lot easier just to draw it out than try to use words to describe it. But the third way I use this iPad is using it as a device just to bring up the notes or shot list or just the plan for one of my videos. But the thing is, there's really only once or twice at most times a week when I'm actually using my iPad for any of those 3 things. And honestly, other than the sketching, there are alternative devices that I have that do those tasks and more. So although at one point I almost, and I mean I still might, buy an iPad Pro just to make some videos on, this in reality still covers all of my bases. I don't see a real reason to upgrade. It slowly covers my bases. This thing is a little old. Like, for example, 30 minutes ago when I tried to bring up some talking points I wanted to mention in this video, the whole app I used to plan didn't update. It's so slow and laggy to scroll through. Like, the changes I made in the document haven't showed up on here, so I can't even use it right now. And since I bought an older iPad refurbished, the battery is mediocre. It's definitely a third-party one. It still gets the job done most of the time for me, but something to keep in mind. And storage-wise, this thing is useless as 32 gigabytes. I tried to update the software to, I think, iPad OS 18, which is the latest one this can get, and I had to uninstall a lot of apps because it needed 11 gigs available to update. That's a third of the entire storage. But again, I just don't see how spending hundreds of bucks for an upgrade would really bring that many tangible benefits day to day for me. Like, for a second display, I already have an external monitor for using a device to bring up some notes on when I'm recording. I could just use one of the devices I actually used to type the notes on in the first place. I guess my point is, I have alternatives that just don't really make the upgrade necessary. For all of the core functions that made me want to buy an iPad in the first place, it still does it very well. But just because upgrading an iPad isn't for me doesn't mean that it isn't for you. So who do I think each of the iPads from the Mini to the Pro are for? And then what are some of the alternatives for each, even right within the Apple ecosystem? But first, I did want to share one way I'm actually upgrading my iPad without actually upgrading it, and that's with the Paperlike 3. And big thanks to Paperlike, who's actually sponsoring this video. This is the latest iteration of their screen protector that sets out to give the signature paper feel. And I'm not usually very good at putting on screen protectors, but they have the Butterfly application system, which helps solve a lot of the reasons someone like me would fail during the application process, specifically with things like dust-caused bubbles and misalignment. It doesn't just keep it aligned, thanks to the helper tool, but it also keeps the surface clear, applies the screen protector itself, and pushes out all the air bubbles. So that makes the hard part extremely easy, and once it's on, you can enjoy the natural premium paper feeling experience. And that's achieved with their nanodots, which is a micro technology used to simulate the exact amount of pressure and friction that your wrist expects when writing with a pen on paper. My only concern was, will this wear down all of the tips of my Apple Pencil? But through years of user feedback and testing, the Paperlike surface has been refined to have the perfect balance of smoothness and friction. And of course, on top of all, it's still a screen protector, so it'll protect your iPad's display from getting scuffs and scratches. But be sure to check out the Paperlike 3. I'll throw a link in the description. And thank you Paperlike for sponsoring this video. But now, who is each iPad for? I'm gonna start from smallest to largest. So first up is the iPad mini, which starts at $500 and has an 8.3 inch screen. It's obviously a capable device, but to me, it just seems awkwardly in between a big phone, being just under an inch and a half bigger than the Pro Max iPhones, and a medium tablet with all other iPads starting at 11 inches. But the biggest reason that I wouldn't get it is because you're paying $150 more than the base iPad, despite it being smaller. So it just feels like you're getting less iPad for the money. I mean, you actually can get cellular on it, so maybe this is like the hidden iPhone 17 Pro Max Ultra if you wanted it to be bad enough. But like mine, I think overall base iPads are the best option. They're at least the default recommendation. I feel like most tablet consumers are just looking for a device with a big touchscreen, a solid battery, at a decent price. And I mean, the base iPad checks off all of those. It's 11 inches, reliable, pretty solid battery life, and at least for Apple, I think very fairly priced at $350, and you can almost always find it on sale at a place like Best Buy. You can write all of your notes for school on it, you can watch movies, you can play games. Display-wise, it's a smidge higher resolution than the Mini, but it is the only iPad to have the sRGB color display space. I'm not sure how noticeable that actually is in real life though. On paper, it's also weaker than the iPad mini, having an A16 chip instead of A17 Pro. But I feel like, kind of like the whole MacBook Neo argument, for the intended user, I don't think they will notice much of a difference. But I do think if you're looking to do something more intense, specifically creatively, the iPad Pro is definitely the popular choice. If you create any kind of digital art or animations or do photo or video editing where you'd like to or need to have the touchscreen aspect, the iPad Pro could very well be your dream device. It does start at $1,000 for the 11-inch version and $1,300 for the 13-inch version, so it's by no means a cheap device. But with display features like OLED, a significantly higher resolution, 120 Hz, and option for nano texture, which personally I'm a pretty big fan of. On paper, that's better than all of the other iPads, the MacBook Airs, and even the MacBook Pros. And I think by the fact that whenever I see an iPad Pro on display, its screen is always looking glorious. Those specs are enough where it actually will make a noticeable difference, especially if you're doing something that needs a nice display. You can spec it up to 1 terabyte of storage on the 11-inch model or 2 terabytes on the 13-inch. And once you actually hit the 1 terabyte upgrade, it also bumps your RAM from 12 to 16 gigabytes and also adds an extra core to the latest and greatest M5 chip. Now, we actually skipped over the iPad Air. Did you also forget about that? Or was that just me? Just like the others, it's a very capable device. I just don't know who it's for. If I had to guess, I would say it's someone who just wants a slightly more powerful iPad than the base one, or someone who wants a 13-inch iPad but doesn't want to pay the $1,300 price tag of the Pro. For the Air, it costs $600 at the 11-inch and $800 at the 13-inch, which is $500 less than the iPad Pro at that size. But compared to the Pro, it's slightly worse in every category, like display and also with the chip, because it only has M4 instead of M5. But again, I feel like for most people buying an iPad, it's just for a device that's big with a touchscreen capability that the base iPad does very well. The need for a touchscreen doesn't typically correlate with the need for a powerful device with a touchscreen. And because of its price, I actually think it's one of Apple's best value devices that I've never really considered. For the things like writing and drawing, if my old iPad can do that just fine, the newer ones can definitely do that and so much more. Now, especially in previous years, some people might have not even bought the base iPad for the touchscreen capability. They bought it because it was the cheapest possible device from Apple that you could use for something like school. When you pair that with the keyboard case, yes, the keyboard itself is almost as expensive as the iPad itself, both total to $600. Buying that in today's world might seem crazy with the release of the MacBook Neo also costing $600. I do think if you don't need a touchscreen at all, 100% get the MacBook Neo. That's going to be the best choice. But I think getting a device that can be a tablet, that when paired up with a keyboard case can be kind of that two-in-one computer that Apple has never offered, all while being able to do likely everything the intended user needs it to on iPad OS, is pretty awesome. Before the MacBook Neo, the MacBook Air was the cheapest option, coming in at around $1,000. So getting a 13-inch iPad Air at $800 is nice. But in the case that you wanted to laptopify it, that would bring the total to $1,120, which is a decent bit pricier. So I feel like if you need a touchscreen, the base iPad, or the mini if you prefer the size, is the choice to go with. If you need the extra power of the iPad Air Pro, I feel like for it to really make sense, you're gonna be having to do some pretty heavy creative work, specifically creative work that needs the touchscreen aspect. But let's just say you need the power of the M5 for something like video editing, and you want a touchscreen just for writing notes. If you spec out an iPad Pro to the 13-inch version, you get the good boost to the 1 terabyte of storage, and you also snag that keyboard case. That'll total to $2,250. That's actually over $500 more than the base 14-inch M5 MacBook Pro, which costs $1,700. But let's say you got the M5 MacBook Pro instead of the iPad Air. Well, you still don't have a touchscreen. But with that $550 price difference, you can use that to comfortably buy the base model iPad. And now you have another device that you can use standalone, you can use as a separate display, you can use to get touchscreen function on macOS with Sidecar. And again, as we saw with the MacBook Neo, putting an iPhone chip into a laptop that gets macOS really opens the door of what you can do with it. And to some extent, even with the Neo being weaker and cheaper, it is more capable than the iPad Pro specifically because of macOS. Like, the iPad Pro is going to be much better when it comes to actually editing and rendering the videos, but on the Neo, you get access to the full Final Cut Pro software. iPad Pro has a much better display, but on the Neo, because of macOS, you have much better window management and desktop management. I do think that iPads are completely capable of being laptop replacements, but I don't always think it's necessary for it to be. I mean, the accessories are quite pricey, and in a lot of cases, it's cheaper to get an iPad in addition to a more powerful laptop, instead of getting an iPad that is equally as powerful as a laptop. But alternatively, if you're already set on getting an iPad Air or Pro and you can get away with doing everything you need to on iPad OS, I say double down and try to use it as your laptop if you don't already plan to. But I don't know if it'd be better to have MacBooks that have the touchscreen ability or iPads to have macOS. Either way, that'll just like muddy the waters even more. There's so much overlap here. My head hurts. At the end of the day, it all comes down to your situation and, more importantly, preferences. And I feel like as you go up the ladder of iPads, the people that need that type of power might not need an iPad at all. But I do think all iPads have purpose, and the base one is kind of like the MacBook Neo of the iPad world. Let me know, what iPad do you have? Which iPad would you like to have? And thank you for watching. Feel free to subscribe for more.